All right, salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. Welcome to the Halloween full moon group meeting, gathering. I wish it was a gathering. I guess this is how we can do it today in our days of forced isolation to connect through our own unique nodes into this world wide web, which of course is also a gift. It's wonderful to get outside and howl at a full moon together. Um, but we can, I guess, each do this individually and hopefully feel that connection. And my intention with these moon groups is to facilitate some astro community, is to help us gather together, if you will, and share with one another and look at these amazing global events like a Halloween full moon as a global thing. You know, what does this mean for us all? What do we see in these alignments of planets and their signs and whatnot? But then also, how is this playing for us individually? And so, whether we address that astrologically, well, the full moon is in my 12th house, for example, or if we address that more personally, right? There's a kid in the hospital, having a hard time in my relationship. There's a really difficult thing going on with this particular friendship. My mother is about to transition, whatever it may be, right? And then, of course, how these things relate to one another. So, how we're going to do this is I'm going to say a few things about this chart kind of one at a time, and we'll break it down in between into breakout groups where everyone will be encouraged to share with one another what's alive in your life, or to answer the suggested topic, and to just share with one another. So I'll break us down into groups of like 4 or 5, and you can just connect with your peers, introduce yourself. We'll have that kind of as our first thing. And then as we go along, hopefully we can get a little bit deeper and deeper and open up more and more. I think very importantly for that to do so, we must all agree. So please really open your hearts and your ears to this one. And as more people come in, I'll probably say this a few times, like, let us please honor the sacred space of confidentiality here, right? So we'll be speaking with strangers, right? But if you honor that we are all star siblings and support one another in this way, we can offer that safe space and that trust of confidentiality, which means, as much as you are interested in your synchronicity with another person's story or something, whatever you hear stays here. Okay. If you meet a friend and you want to take that further, maybe send them a little private message, which you can do using the chat box, right? You can literally direct who you chat to. You can open the participants box and right click on somebody and send them a direct message. And, hey, here's my number. Shoot me a text sometime if you'd like. I'd like to go deeper with you or whatever. I have these interesting controls on my side that would let me break us down into groups and then change up the groups the next time we do so. But I'd rather keep you with the same folks. Now, not everybody wants to share. All right. So when I hit breakout group, you're going to see an option, right? That's going to say, yes, join a breakout room. And if you don't want to, then say no. All right. And then you can just wait. There'll probably be 15 minutes or so where we do these breakout things. And then we'll come back and we'll look at the chart together a little bit more too. If you know for sure that you would rather kind of witness this rather than participate, and that's totally cool, do your thing. I invite you actually to open up the participants box, to right click on your own name, and to change your name to like a number or a one word thing. That will help me understand that you'd rather kind of play it low key and be in the witness space. Because even if you say no to the breakout room, some other things might go down where you're encouraged to share. And if you don't want to, I honor that. I love it. Be you, right? It may be later you'll want to go into a breakout room, and you'll get this option every time we break out, okay? So there's a little bit of logistics. Now let's get into this thing. A Halloween full moon, a Taurus full moon. There's at least 4 of you online right now, as I saw names coming in, who were with me last year in Mexico when we had like a Taurus new moon, where the new moon in the sign of Scorpio was opposite Uranus. And here we are a year later where it's the full moon, right? In Taurus, that's so strongly configured to the planet Uranus, who I like to call Taurinus in this sign. I mean, 3 arc minutes away, right? So when it's new moon opposite Uranus, as it was last year, you have your greatest chance of seeing Uranus with the naked eye. And so many of us went down to Mexico to try to have that experience under dark skies, and maybe didn't find skies that were quite dark enough, but we had all sorts of amazing experiences, and rather Uranian, some of them. And so it was good. This year, Uranus, who is visible with the naked eye, perhaps once a year, and the time comes when Earth is closest to Uranus, and that is now. We see that in the chart when the sun is opposite Uranus. This is literally a time when Uranus can be seen, but not tonight. Why? Because the moon, right, with her brilliant reflections of the sunlight, hides the darkness of the sky. If you're fortunate enough to live in dark sky spaces where you can see the Milky Way, you know that that river of stars goes away when it's full moon time, right? So this is like the least visible solar opposition to Uranus because it's full moon time. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean we don't be it. But I do want to honor that Uranus is very much like this. A card of the tarot that was once associated with the planet Mars. So you've probably all seen this image from the Rider-Waite tarot deck of the 16th card called the Tower. And I want to spend some time speaking about that in our groups. So here's your first assignment, and I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes. Actually, let's do 16 minutes, and I'll do groups of 4. So wherever you are, time yourselves. Please know that the breakout groups will not be recorded. So I hope you won't worry about sharing there so much. And in that space, you'll each have 4 minutes. Sorry, I'm just pushing a bunch of buttons here to sort this out. Groups of 4 to 5 people per room. So if you end up with 5 people, try to keep your time to about 3 minutes each, because I'm going to set my timer for 16 minutes if it's 4. The gig is introduce yourself quickly and say one thing that you notice in this image that we're looking at, this tower card image. So it should be up on your screen. You might have to move the cameras that are on your screen to get a clearer view of it. I don't know what you're looking at, but maybe take a screenshot of it, or just like really center into it right now. Maybe just right now before we do this breakout room thing. Feel into what you kind of first see in this card. So, all right, so here's the gig again. We're gonna break out. You're gonna get a button that says, yes, I want to go to a breakout room, or no, I don't. And that's totally fine if you don't. And when you join a room, then introduce yourself. You're with Astro Crew, so maybe the quick version of that is where your name, where you're from, and sun, moon, and rising. And if you prefer to go incognito, change your name here in Zoom and introduce yourself that way. I mean, it's Halloween time. Put a costume on, have fun, have some fun. That's totally cool if you prefer, right? Sun, moon, and rising. And what's one thing you notice in this card? So hopefully that's clear. The other thing I would ask, and we didn't do this last time, but I really want to get some of that back. So If you would, as a group, maybe choose a few things to put in the chat box, right? So that would, I think, as a group, what did the 4 or 5 of you notice in this card that you would like the bigger group to entertain? And of course, we can imagine we'll see that each of the groups sees similar things, right? And we'll start, and before we even get to this chart, we'll speak about this Tower card. All right, so you will shortly be invited to a breakout room, and I will see you on the other side. All right, we've resumed recording. You're back from this first breakout group of co-contemplating this Rider-Waite Tower card of the Tarot, the number 16. And so I'd love to hear what you and your group found in that card together. If you just type that into the chat, and I'll just read some of these things out as they're coming in. So, red cloak, the crown, right? And there's actually 2 crowns in the card, which I think are very interesting. But usually when we hear the crown, we're talking about this one that seems to be getting blasted off of the tower. The lightning image evokes fear, transformation, breaking down the old structures, crumbling, breaking down, clearly clearing a way for the new structures in a rapid way. Zap! Can never prepare. A few mentions are going through and loving it. Creative cycles, best ever, right? So I'm hearing this is how it's being experienced by some people in this particular group. And folks with specific astrological alignments and how this is happening, but some more general things, feeling rebellious about everything, okay, and love of life disappearing. Our group focused on the crowns, the one blown open on the external structure and the one remaining on the human head, true liberation. But which is which? Are they both in their own way? So let's tune into that too. All right, so our group focused on the crown, which was a surprise. I noticed previously for some and lots of comments on the meaning of that or the interpretation. I didn't quite follow the rest of that, but I love that the crown was a surprise, right? Because it's kind of the biggest thing in this card. And yeah, it's amazing in these tarot images or these sacred images from so many of the walks that, you know, it's like a good book. You hear something new every time you read it. All right, the gray figure looks really scared. We are definitely dealing with our fears. Yeah, and then I'm wondering which one of these is gray, because I typically see them as blue and red. Maybe the gray stockings on the one. What else are we reading here? The duality to synchronize the 2 figures, representing prepared awareness that also defends to protect, and the other, if possible, denial. Or is it surrendering like the hangman? Yeah, I was privileged enough to be in on that group, and so I'll reflect a little bit more of what I heard in that exchange. And one of the things we spoke about was the definition of reality and what it is and what it means to create a new reality. Yeah, really beautiful. The lightning comes into a scene in the night. That's a cool thing to hear as well. All right, so I'm caught up with everything that's in the chat, but everyone, you're absolutely welcome to add more. One more thing came in. Group 5, I didn't know you guys were numbered, but all right, here from group 5. 1 noticed the nighttime, the dark on the card, and the rest noticed the crown. 2 of us really noticed the blue falling figure in the second crown. Talked about all of us noticing change, loss this year, and how pain is moving in us, or the need to just surrender and let go. All right. And so let's get to this chart, and I am going to put this chat away so I can just flow a little bit, and then we'll break out and we'll wrap a little bit more. Why the Tower card, right? When I'm looking at this Halloween full moon or Taurus full moon, the full moon aligned to Taurus, and Taurus, Uranus is the reason why, because Uranus really is change, you know, and it can zap us like that from out of nowhere and awaken us We often, as astrologers, associate Uranus with accidents. In fact, it's wonderful to know that Uranus was discovered by accident, right? And with technology, and these are associations, delineations with Uranus. It's interesting to know that the so-called new planets, right, the invisible planets that have come onto the scene quite recently, seem to carry some astrological delineation dependent upon the zeitgeist of the times during which they were discovered. And I'll also say how they were discovered. And so Uranus is amazing. It's William and Caroline Herschel in their backyard in Bath in the UK with a gigantic telescope, which was all the craze if you could afford it, comet hunting. And they found one. But no, they didn't. For when they reported their new comet to the community, it was discovered, having tracked this comet for a few days, that it was behaving like a planet. And indeed, it was a planet. And this was Uranus. So think about that shock. Think about that amazing revolution, right? This breakthrough, literally crumbling the tower or the foundations of a cosmology that had existed time immemorial, where Saturn, the slowest moving light, is the skin of the solar system, and suddenly breakthrough. Now, I would argue that maybe the Copernican revolution of a heliocentric cosmology had to go down to allow this great shift that happened with the discovery of Uranus. Maybe Uranus had to be discovered as a mistake. Maybe we had to be looking for comets who themselves, and of course we've had this one, are harbingers of great change, the wild card. And Uranus is such a wild card, you know. Some associate Uranus, when we relate astrology and the tarot, to the ultimate wild card, who is the Fool. Yeah, so if you open like a Rider-Waite deck, you'll notice that the Magician is the first card because it is the first card. And usually people think that the Fool comes before because it's zero and zero is before one. But many would suggest that the tarot itself, if it reaches back into a time where it's not known to, that it's even older than the zero, and that in the original decks, actually, the Fool had no number, and it was the card that you could put anywhere, the true wild card. And it's fun to think of how that state of the Fool, the innocence reborn, the compost of the end of a cycle, right, of the old seeds into what is it, like decaying fruit into the rich soil that they can be planted within. Um, that we kind of, it necessitates some Fool state, and that sometimes that's the state of the highest wisdom. And it's fun to say that with Mercury retrograde now, who's just coming out from under the beams, being reborn as a morning star, having finished a 4-month cycle where he kind of finds his way to the bearded sage of the evening sunset west, and then goes between Earth and the sun and has that beard burned off to be born anew as a fresh-faced babe on the other side. And we're kind of in that state right now. There's a wonderful essence of new birth there. But sometimes it's that the old things have to get shattered for us to rebuild, right? And yeah, I think we're all having that in our lives right now, and there's a lot of fear around that, of course. You know, I mean, election time is looming. This year of 2020 has just been nuts and chaotic, and regardless of what you tune into, it seems like the story is scary if you're looking for the information outside of yourselves. Um, that being said, many beautiful beings that I have the honor to speak with in my work, you know, as an astrologer, as a counseling astrologer, are really taking advantage of this time to be a pivotal breakthrough time in their lives, right? To release some of the old that's been hanging them up and open into the new that's going to propel them forward. So back to the discovery of Uranus, telescope technology, which, like the prism, which William Herschel later used to discover or perhaps rediscover infrared light, was a technology of optics that actually allowed the human experience to expand beyond the limits of our sight and our vision. And I think the astrological association with the planet Uranus resonates there. It helps us see things beyond the scope of the eyes alone. When astrology is used right, which is astrology as a way in rather than astrology as a way out. So Uranus technology, accidents, shattering the old, opening the potential of a new cosmology, and a birth does not happen without some chaos. Uranus, so electric, so different, actually wasn't named for a long time. Herschel named Uranus the Georgian star. I think this was a money grab move, hoping to get paid by King George. Speaking of the crown flying off, you can imagine that the American astronomers in 1782 and in 1781 weren't too hip to the idea of this new planet being named George. The name Uranus actually didn't come around for a bit. They tried Neptune for the planet Uranus, and that just clearly was not a fit. And then, uranium was later named. There's kind of the radioactive principles of uranium being discovered around the same time. The great work of Marie Curie, team, right? And husband, I guess. So, yeah, I think we'll speak about Neptune another time. Or no, you know what? I'm going to speak about Neptune some now. It came up in my group that Neptune, at the time of this Uranian Taurus full moon, that Neptune is square to the lunar nodes. Now, for those of you that don't know the astronomy of the lunar nodes, they are where, from Earth's point of view, where the paths of the moon and the sun cross. And that being said, that's one of the reasons why we can tell that this Taurus full moon is not a lunar eclipse, because the moon here is, well, south of the ecliptic path, the path of the sun. So from the northern hemisphere's point of view, it's like the sun and Earth's shadow, and the moon is below Earth's shadow. So no eclipse for you. From the southern hemisphere point of view, the opposite is true. The moon is above the shadow of Earth. It's very hard to tell because all you see is a full moon. When new moons meet close to these crossing points, the lunar nodes, it's a solar eclipse. And when full moons do, it's a lunar eclipse. And we'll enter eclipse season sometime soon in a theater called You. We will have a total solar eclipse on December 14th. 2020, which interestingly in this country is the day of the Electoral College. But that's a tale for later, okay? So Neptune squaring the nodes is a very influential energy and interesting energy. And Neptune in Pisces, modern astrology would say, is where Neptune should be right at home, energetically speaking. Neptune was discovered in 1846, and also with a telescope. But unlike Uranus, which happened through this freaky accident, Neptune was discovered on purpose. Neptune, we knew where to point that telescope because Neptune's position had mathematically been calculated. And the reason why we were able to do so is, having tracked Uranus for some time, we could see that something out there was pulling on Uranus. And in that sense, Neptune, I think, teaches us that we are all connected. So it's an interesting thing with the lunar nodes here and the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius, very much the axis of truth. Sagittarius, the truth that there is one only higher truth. And Gemini, the truth that there are as many truths as there are beings, perhaps, How do we hold both of those truths and not feel like one of them has to be a lie? That's one of the challenges of the time. And one of the answers to that, I would suggest, is compassion. So Pisces Neptune, this is the sign where Venus is said to be exalted. Venus now having recently ingressed Libra, where she's said to make a home, and Mercury ingressing Libra from the other side. He's been in Scorpio and turned it around and went back in. And of course, Libra is the sign that hosted the new moon of the lunation, which we're meeting now. Right. So I like to think of this as a Libra Taurus lunation. New moon was in Libra in these late degrees, pretty close to where Mercury is today, squaring the Capricorn crew. and a Libra new moon echoed by or reflected then later by a Taurus full moon. So it's an interesting thing to see all of these Venusian transmissions of the sign of Libra and the sign of Taurus and the sign of Pisces. And I'll suggest that they do love in very different ways. And that's something we're going to journey back into. But let me rewind to Uranus and to this Tower card. Interestingly, for Uranus, it took a while to get a name, but the ephemerides, the planetary positions for Uranus came through quite quickly. And the reason why is, as I was saying before, Uranus is about once a year, potentially visible to the naked eye. And so astronomers had seen Uranus before. Not only with telescopes, like Newton had seen Neptune even and recorded some star out there, but I mean, even with the naked eye. So going back into very ancient astrology and on record from China and Greece and other places, we had indications of this star that showed up and kind of went away. Well, that was the planet Uranus, is only visible for about 3 days each year, and not this year again, because the full moon is just kind of blinding the darkness from that place. So it's an interesting thing to see that Uranus had been, in this sense, foreseen. So yeah, Uranus can be the accident, right? David Cochran, who's an astrologer I quite admire, he calls it like free jazz, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. But if you can release the feeling that that's just a bunch of chaos, it snaps you into the moment. And that's the purpose of trauma, you know? Not that we're meant to get that while we're in it, but sometimes we do. And sometimes in that near death, you know, that vision of the beyond opens and we are reborn into enjoying the living process more than we could before. There's a wonderful thing that Prince said, and that will bring us, I guess, back to the crown, which is that it can take years to become an overnight success. And I love that image of Taurus, Uranus and Taurus, and a Taurus moon reflecting Scorpio light. Because Taurus, I think, very importantly teaches the necessity to get away from our cultural conditioning of rat race so that we may tune into the grace of Earth's pace and unwrap the present of presence, the only moment now. And Uranus is a very electric lightning bolt being. So kind of slowing down in the Uranus place can be a tricky thing to do. You'll notice that Moon and Uranus are keeping some company here. This is the point called true black moon Lilith. And Lilith is many things, but one is, let me just say this. When we look through the place that holds that energetic center or foci called true black moon Lilith, we are gazing at the lunar apogee, where the moon in her elliptical orbit of the Earth, if we use that model, is furthest from our planet. Now, what does that mean? It depends on what you believe Earth to be and what the moon to be, okay? But one thing it definitely means is that moon is far. And so you've heard this term probably by now called supermoon, which we use to describe that moon when it's very close by and brighter and bigger and faster. The moon's average speed is 13 1/3 degrees per day. And right now she's traveling much less than 12 degrees per day. Why? Because this is moon, and we can see this in a chart when moon is in this proximity to true black moon Lilith. That means far moon, dim moon, small moon, slow moon. And it's a really beautiful connection to something that we often say about Taurus. Now, people say it in different ways. Some people call it stubborn. But our conditioning is set to demonize the slow. And I think one of the great commandments of Taurus is for us to slow down, to unwrap the moment of the present of the moment now, and to also understand, right? Like it can take years to become an overnight success. So sometimes we want change just right now, we're going to feel that with Uranus, right? But it's funny, I just tried to snap and I couldn't, right? It can take a while to learn how to do that, and then learn how to do it well. And in time, I mean, this one still doesn't quite go there for me. Yeah. Could practice. So how about we learn to slow down, to speed up our breakthroughs and our evolution? And in the chaos of this moment now, there's a lot here that's saying, hey, look, compassion is the key. Honoring the other, even if their truth seems to be so far from the truth. Yeah. And where are we in this transformational thing, which frankly is quite scary. So it's wearing a pretty significant Halloween costume. So in this Tower Tarot card, it was wonderful to hear how many of the groups kind of focused in the same places. I'll tell you kind of a quick version of the many things that I see in this card. One, very importantly, has 3 windows, and 3 in the tarot is the number of the Empress. So yes, though we see some dynamic change, some accidental reconfiguration of life based upon the old tower getting caught on fire and crumbling, there's something here which is actually about nurturing, or that Empress card in the 3 is often associated with birth. Interestingly, in astrology, the 3rd is said to be the place where the moon rejoices, in the house of the goddess. We see fire taking the shape of the phoenix bird of great scorpionic transformation, the one that burns and then is reborn through its ashes. Yeah. I love that folks saw 2 crowns. So one, it just seems like it's getting blown off the tower. And then one is still being worn by the being in blue, whose red shoes seem to desire a connection to those flames in the windows, like it doesn't want to let go. Even if my life is on fire, please no. And we could see this frowning one, just so miserable about this state of change, which was, it seems, stimulated from the electricity of the heavens, weighed down perhaps by this crown that she would not release, and just falling backwards. And maybe even in denial of this whole thing. This crown was not worn by the tower, I'm sure, but rather by this one who wears the cape of red and seems to be trying his best to fly, right? It's like, hey, if the whole scene's burning down and I'm falling to the ground, I might as well see if this cape works. And, I love seeing this fiery energy, which is the energy of intuition, of will, of spirit, kind of following this one who seems to be attempting to enjoy the exhilaration of the wind in his hair and all that. And maybe it's easier because the crown seems to have been blasted right off of his head. So I like to say this, choose change before change chooses you. And if you weren't able to, and the change came, at least just, try to see if that cape will work rather than just falling to a death, which might accelerate a rebirth or might actually delay it. I mean, either way, both of these beings are going to fall to a new earth. Hopefully there's a moat down there and they can land a little more safely in the water of the heart and then use the crumbled bricks from the old tower, which is more than just a tower, it's an extension of the mountain, of the land itself, to righteously rebuild, a tower that maybe can better host the beings that they are here to become, perhaps. So in my group, it was fun to consider that idea of just like miserably falling and trying to stay where you once were, queen, to, in an exhilarated way, diving into the unknown, even if it might mean the death of what you have always been. But, with Mercury retrograde right now, let's retrograde all things. And aren't we taught that when you can't control a thing, the way through quickly is to surrender? And so maybe the one in gallons of blue, without the interruption of the red will or the airy mind, is simply surrendering to the flow. I mean, that's the key to the back dive, right? You got to relax. And interestingly, it is this one, I've never considered this before, who's considering. Why do I say that? Because consider means with the stars and looking up, right? Where did that lightning come from? We're here, we're so focused on the earth. And as was brilliantly pointed out by some of these groups, and something that I'm kind of astonished that I hadn't seen in this card, but may, like a beautiful book, it be new, and may, like reality is true. It was once my sister, but now it's you who's helping me learn how to read. May every time I see this card, I have the advantage of seeing a new thing. So thank you for pointing out that black is night. And it feels to me resonant with a phrase I received the other day, which was, maybe the problem is not that there's not enough humans who are awake. Maybe the problem is there's too many who are, and that what this time really requires is for us to remember how to dream. And I think that these forces, which really are about day and night, our diurnal rational way, where the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and our nocturnal dream-based art, which understands that it's much more interesting to get from here to there if we curve like the river flows. That we're in a time where the rational mind is on overload. We were born into that time, and these very Uranian computer devices have accelerated that thing. And the more we awaken, the more dangerous the possibility of completely disconnecting from the dream. So this will be a more challenging share for your group, which is simply this. What in your life right now could potentially host your greatest transformation? In other words, is there something that you're called to release? There's this great song, Live and Let Die. And sometimes it's kind of like die and let live. What will I give so that I may receive a new directive? And so what in your life is really stimulating that need to change? Is it a pain in a relationship? Is it releasing all the television and the constant just programming of the major media? Is it choosing to even more information and dive deeper, even though you're typically afraid, but trying to find out where you can find uncensored information, which seems in our time to be more and more impossible. Where are you? What wants to shift? And maybe it's something that's been building for years, for decades, for lifetimes, overnight. It can take years to become an overnight success, we're told by Prince, the one who holds the crown. And where you are in this need for change and the stimulants in your life that are invoking it, do you feel that it would be best for you just to surrender? Or is this a time where you're really meant to fly into it and try to accelerate it? Is this a time for the dream vision, or is it a time for that rational mind and figuring it out and determining the timeline and all of these things? Looks like one of you was able to draw on the screen, or maybe I did, but that's cool. All right, so that's the vision for this next breakout group. What in your life most needs to change right now? And is it better for you, do you think, to surrender to it, or to kind of like really attempt to drive that, to navigate your ship through these stormy waters consciously? Hopefully that makes sense. Here comes the breakout rooms. Once again, and especially to those of you who are in the meeting anew, you will receive a little note saying, do you want to join a breakout room? And you either write yes or no. If you say no, you're going to be hanging out for about 12 minutes time. If you say yes, you'll end up in a group, the same groups that you were in last time, maybe plus a new friend or two. And we'll take it shorter this time. So maybe everybody just share for 2 minutes each, and then a little group thing in the end about what went down. And again, what's most needing to change in your life? Is it going to go better if you surrender to it, or kind of consciously drive this thing? And both of those options might be real. All right, breakout room button happening now. Hold on, let me just push a couple things first. All right, I think it's on. See you on the other side. 12 minutes for all. Okay, all right. Well, welcome back, and thank you for keeping the confidence and the trust of those who you're honored to break out and speak with. I think this truth of consent and confidence and confidentiality are just really important words as we move forward, and holding that safe space for one another. I think that's so necessary for us to hold ourselves in our own transformation. So much of this can be actually delayed by our need for it to be so fast. Because what happens in our need to change is that we shame ourselves for not having changed yet. And that just delays the whole thing, right? So learning how to reflect upon how far we've come from where we once were, even if we feel like we've taken a few retrograde steps, putting our hands on our heart and saying, wow, if I was me from 5 years ago and witnessing this, I would be so much more freaked out, honor my growth, you know? If I was me from 7 days ago, or 7 years ago, or 7 lifetimes ago, I don't know if I have witness of that, I don't, but and this person said that thing to me, this is how I would have reacted. Now this is how I respond. All right. So changes from Bowie came into our chat in reference to what went down in these smaller conversations in the breakout rooms. Beautiful sharing shows up a few times, as those of you looking at the chat box can see. This has been an amazingly creative time for some, right? And that's another thing about that lightning bolt and Uranus, who, Rick Tarnas wrote a book arguing that mythologically, perhaps Prometheus would have been a more aligned title for this planet that seems to bring great change. Part of this lightning from the realms divine is to remind us that we each have our own creative spark. Yeah. And when we're so lost or confused or feel disempowered, going to our own creativity is one of the greatest studies. And of course, we are our own greatest masterpiece. So, tuning into our sculptures and our songs and our poems and these beautiful things that we create as a reflection of our great work on the highest art form, which is us, is I think a really beautiful and important thing to do. And some of that also is because the way the lightning bolt has broken the tower of the old reality, like you got a little more time on your hand. I can't tell you how many more astrology students I have right now that are just saying, I've been wanting to like really devote my time to my astrological study for years and years and decades, but I couldn't because I was so busy with my job or whatever. And now suddenly here I am. So thanks, Taurus. Proceeding with consciousness, which interesting, I read first is proceeding with cautiousness, and that's not what proceeding with consciousness, which I wish, one of the things that I would like to have had studied in my life already at this point, I'm constantly called to and sometimes engage, is more of like a etymological understanding of language, right? So like caution, cautiousness, cuidado, like maybe those words have something to do with consciousness. I think with the earth signs, we really do want to slow down to receive more of that moment now. So perhaps cautiousness is consciousness, or maybe I just can't read. All right. Compelled to tease out what's fixed and what's flexible about my karma. An invitation to acknowledge the finite mind and challenge myself to expand my view of reality. It's really beautiful, right? Like, who wrote the fucking rules? You know what I mean? Like, what is unchangeable? What is just written in the stars? What are the lots of my fate? And, versus what can I actually change? And where do I want to align my kind of creative consciousness? What works better? So, I mean, if we just choose to define our reality by it can't change, then it won't. Or when it does, that's the best. Like, I think when we start to realize more and more that though we are who we've always been, we have made these great changes, we just honor that change as possible. And if so, is that because it was written in the cards? Or because we actually awakened in some way that is something worth honoring ourselves for? And thank you for that share. That's really wonderful. That speaks powerfully to my own experience. And that reminds me also of my first breakout group. One thing that I heard was a great musician who's also a producer working right now on a cover of The Power of Love. And so we heard this as the Tower of Love. And so I want to get back to this idea of what is love? But let me read a couple more. Acceptance of emotional mental defenses from early abandonment to shedding old conditioning to adapt to allowing freedom of my being to experience life's new birthing. That's beautifully and poetically said. Both surrender and act. Yeah, we can do both. Isn't surrender actually an act? Isn't acting a certain type of surrender, right? Especially when it's that thing we wouldn't allow ourselves to do for so long because we didn't want to, rock the boat or whatever. But we've actually learned to surrender to who we really are, which maybe says we have to share our own voice. And in that regard, that action of speaking up is in and of itself a surrender. Both surrender and act. We wait to being called from a place of surrender to the current of life to move through any door or portal. Yeah. So that just reminds me to say thank you so much, everyone, for joining me in this thing. one thing that will happen as it moves along is me discovering ways to kind of pass the talking stick more. I love that we can break down into these groups and share and then kind of come back, and I can, but why should I host this thing or keep my hands on the wheel? Is it my need to control or show you what I know, right? It's always such a wonderful truth to know that I have community of really turned on folks and elders who can help me see that we've made it through times like this before, and to advise me. I'm really fortunate to be in a space where I'm consistently receiving wisdom, especially from the folks who I every day have the honor to sit with in consultation. I mean, counselor be counseled, is that really, and healer be healed. These are very important functions of the shifting and the awakening of our time today. So it's a treat to be honored by the wisdom of your words and to have space where we can all experience that together. Thank you. This is the Halloween full moon in Richmond, California. And so I'll be waking up early to watch the moon set because it'll be pretty much in its full alignment at sunrise. And of course, the full moon is opposite the sun, and that means that the full moon sets when the sun rises. This moon has some southern latitude, which in the northern hemisphere will set before the degree does, and I could go on and on into the astro nerdiness, But I typically like to show charts when I'm connecting with other folks that aren't configured to my own location, right? I will share the interesting shift from this full moon to the previous full moon, which was basically I'm seeing something that I didn't think I would see, actually. But the previous full moon configured like right in the middle of the day. And I was able to watch that full moon rising some hours later. But why I was a little surprised there is the lunation cycle is 29 and a half days. So that means if one full moon is aligning at sunset, the next one should align at sunrise. But this 29 and a half days thing is an average, right? And it's so much dependent upon the lunar speed. So when the moon starts slow in a lunation, lunations tend to be longer. And I'm going to leave that there. Like, I won't actually, when this ends, I'm going to go spend some time with that and learn some astrology by engaging with what I like to call sacred astronomy. But for now, let me just say that one of the things that we do to kind of release the local, right? Act locally, but think globally. And so to the global is we'll use the so-called natural zodiac or zero Aries chart wheel, where we put 0 degrees tropical Aries at the space typically reserved for the ascendant. Now, my work has brought me to a discovery, and I'm not saying that I'm the first to have discovered it, but it was a discovery in my life. It was a aha. It was actually a medicine ceremony with me sitting with a globe in my hand, where I really started to understand more of the structure of the zodiac, which helped me see that, like so many ancient wisdom traditions and some shamanic traditions from around the world, the tropical zodiac is based upon a system of the energies of the cardinal directions, and that the cardinal signs actually are the cardinal directions, they're cusps. And the truth is, the northern pole of Earth is always leaning towards 0 tropical Cancer, and southern pole towards 0 tropical Capricorn. So that's north and south. And that means that this is east and west. And not just on a chart, especially not on a chart for the southern hemisphere, but globally, literally 0 Aries, whether you're in Australia, as some of you are, in California, where I currently sit, southern hemisphere, northern hemisphere, this point, 0 Aries, is due east from the center of the globe. And that's why we can say, like, the full moon of this cycle in the sign of Libra was as if it's in the seventh sign of the chart. And some argue with that, especially traditionalists, because a lot of the rules of our craft were first formulated through the teachings of astrology based upon a Cancer rising chart and called the Thema Mundi. And that's a beautiful and long story. But this is a very astronomical chart, right? Why put 0 Aries on the left? Well, if it's the east point from the center of the globe where we are all connecting, it's as if 0 Aries is the global ascendant. Now, I've seen the kind of modern thing of, well, the first is Aries and the second is Taurus, really fall apart. And it can be a thing that really handicaps us, but there is a correlation here. And one of the ways where we can get more global with the chart is to stick 0 Aries on the left. And this is said to, in a way, represent, therefore, like a houseless chart. And the truth is, the tropical signs were once called the terrestrial houses, right? So the tropical signs literally are Earth's houses. Where the houses from wherever you are on the surface of Earth, those are the celestial houses. All right. So this Libra full moon showed up where I was, or new moon, sorry, Libra new moon at 12:31 p.m. It was right at the midheaven in where I am in California. And for other people, it was right at the IC. It was the middle of the night, where it was midday for me. But for all of us, it was west of the center of the Earth, because the west point is 0 degrees Libra. And we spoke about this some in our last moon group, right? This mystic rectangle and this opposition with Mars and the T square with the Capricorn crew. And, it's charged times we're living in. But as I said before, I'm really fascinated in this truth. While Neptune has been swimming through the Piscean waters for some time and slowly approaching the degree that's said to host the energy of Venus's exaltation, which is in late tropical Pisces. We have a new moon in the sign of Libra, said to be Venus's diurnal domicile, and then a full moon in the sign of Taurus, said to be Venus's nocturnal domicile. So I really want to speak about day and night. And, what is love by day versus love by night? And let's speak, I think, about the 12th and the energy of Pisces, and the 2nd and the energy of Taurus, and then the 7th and the energy of Libra, which are different versions of love. Now, every sign is love. I once asked Rick Levine at a party we were at in Seattle, when I was really starting to dig into this thing of, all right, every sign is one side of a pole, and just like hot and cold are two sides of a thing called temperature, Libra and Aries, you put them together, it spells libraries. They're two sides of a thing called relationship, where Libra is othership and Aries is selfness. And we better remember we need a healthy dose of each to meet in the middle way of right relating. Yeah. Of course, there's many other words that fit the script of what Aries and Libra are the two sides of. So what are Taurus and Scorpio the two sides of? And I was speaking with Rick about this, and I can't remember why at the time, but Leo and Aquarius were very highlighted. And so I said, hey man, what is the one thing that Leo and Aquarius are the two sides of? And he said love, where Aquarius is kind of love for the all humanity, and then Leo is the love for self, which is so necessary to follow that flame of our inspired creative gift, and then he goes, well, no, wait, all the signs are love. Right? And we had a chuckle and spoke about that for a bit. And then we talked more about Leo and Aquarius. That's not for us to do today. Maybe speaking more about Taurus and Scorpio. And I think that will be subject for our next breakout room. So prepare yourself. But for now, I'm just going to give a little transmission about Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Libra. I've found And let's go to Pisces land. There we go. let the sun shine. This has been my like desktop scene. Many of you have done readings with me recently. Like you probably are familiar with that image, right? It's just like let the sun shine. I just like want to keep that next to a chart, whether it's a client's or especially if it's my own or one of these moments. It's just like there's something about that image of being under the seas, but knowing that there's a bright light once I surface from this strange deep dive that I'm on. That is very helpful for me recently. So Pisces for me very much feels that way, and I will relate this to the 12th house. Like what happened during the rising of your 12th house stuff, and the answer, I mean, this is before your birth, right? You're in the waters of your mother's womb, and I would like to imagine that is connecting you to the waters of all that is, and that like snorkel, the umbilical cord that connects you to your mother, is also a microcosm of a greater cord, maybe the silver cord, right? The lunar cord that connects you to higher self, that connects you to all that is or whatever. And that's really kind of, I think, the experience for the child at that time. I don't remember anything about when I was there. And so this is a lot of the dance of the mind and the speaking to some of those who do, but that feels right. And it's that connection to source and the all that is just a great piece. And somebody wrote in the chat about abandonment, and I think one of the great abandonments that we're all experience is just being born into this world of matter, is the feeling that we are separate from all that is, from God, goddess, universe, the mystery, whatever you want to call it, and that's something, we had to drink this strange cup of tea when we came in, perhaps to forget what we really are so that we can do what we came here to do. Yeah, but that doesn't mean we don't feel separate from the all. And in that pain, and in our culture, I should say, in the culture in which I was raised, there was no suggestion of how to reclaim that connection. And some go to the spirits, some to the psychedelics, some to the ashram. I mean, whatever it may be, hopefully at some point in our life, we can find a way to reconnect that energy of the one and only thing. And I think it's helpful actually in times, even though terrifying like now, where we know everyone's going through it. And they might not be going through it like I am. I mean, they are them. And yet we're still kind of going through a thing. And that's a really helpful thing about astrology. I mean, there is going to be a Taurus new moon aligned to Uranus, like whether you're awake or fully asleep, that's happening for you. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen with you or to you. I mean, you can actually be just disengaged enough according to the commandments of our culture that you don't experience these things at all, which of course is the biggest drag. We'd rather kind of feel the pain of them so we can grow than miss the opportunity altogether. But regardless, there is this noise in the heavens calling us to grow, right? It's called Taurus Full Moon conjoined Uranus and all of these other things. Venus opposite Chiron. There's something about healing here. Mercury square Saturn. There's something about restructuring the mind here, which is a really brilliant thing that I heard in one of my groups. Like there's like some neuralistic reprogramming that needs to get done, right? So like the structures of my mind want to get realigned so I can more harmoniously communicate with those who I teach and lead. And you can see that here. And you can see how that's going to apply to a being more than it would another. And that's the great gift of astrology. Again, the noise happens, but the sound is when that noise tickles your eardrums, and it will do so in a way differently than it does my own. So the Uranus, the Taurus full moon, this Taurus conjoined Uranus full moon, right? That's going to show up for me differently than it does you. So the 12th, one of the 12th house answer I receive when I ask people my favorite question to ask, which is, what are we doing here? Right? Like, what's the point of Earth? Unfortunately, I was at some point stimulated in some way enough to get bored with the answer which I was taught, which was nothing, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, you die and it's lights out, and there's no real point to it. So just, I guess, be a good guy, or okay. Anyway, an answer I usually hear from the 12th place of what are we doing here? They'll say, to get back to source. Wait, what? Then why did we come here in the first place? It just doesn't seem logical. But I will say that energy of source and the boundarylessness and the very kind of watery thing, I like to think of Pisces is the rains that connect the waters of heaven to the waters of earth. And that great cycle, which will never end, that great circle of water life, And the rains can be quite depressing, because as we open up and tune into agape, universal love, the I am you as you or me, and something about a walrus and we're all one, it can be quite a depressing thing, because there's a lot of pain in our world that's being experienced and expressed, and avoided and ignored and all that stuff. So it's hard to awaken our right/responsibility as empathic beings. And so, but we do. And when we do, we kind of reconnect to those waters of the womb. Anyway, that bubble of the womb at some point gets really linear. And you're tied to somebody that's screaming, and who knows what's going on in there, but it can't be pretty. You are getting flushed out of this, bubble where you have been floating safely and drinking through the snorkel, and supplied with everything you need, Why? Because every sign, or you could say every house, is a reaction to the one that precedes it. So the one whose devotions are about the all, connection to everything, like that's going to take us off the wheel of life. And many will say, hey, that's the goal. Okay, cool. But maybe we come back for a reason. I think it has to be this way. And so I think, very importantly, the first reaction to the 12th is, it's not about the one, it's about one thee. Who am I? What is my mountain to climb? And of course, that kind of wounds this way of we're all one, right? And they say, welcome to the world, Brett, or they say, like, let me hang him upside down and spank him under the spotlight. said the guy in the mask in my weird birthplace called a hospital, whatever. But regardless, I might say, what's a Brett? All I know is this oneness. Actually, I think this is why babies aren't allowed to know how to speak, because if they told us what they know, the whole matrix would dissolve instantly. We kind of have to sign up for the program and make some agreements before we're given language. So you'll find some always contradictions. I mean, it's almost like neighboring signs are way more opposite than opposite signs. The opposition used to be called the diameter. Neighboring signs, we teach this typically now, they changed polarity, they changed triplicity, they changed quadruplicity. You might know those terms, by the way, as like gender and element and modality. I mean, from one sign to the next, everything flips. And traditionally, they're said to be blind to one another, because how can I focus on who am I, if my focus is on how am I the one, unconnected to the all and source. Yeah. And this is a really important gift, I will say, that the second offers to the first, or by sign, let's say that Taurus to Aries. Who am I is a wonderful question that sparks the torch of independence, which sadly can lead us into isolation. Yeah, I'm here on my quest. This is about me. And we are programmed by our corrupt culture to believe that independence equals isolation, self-sufficiency. So that if you ask the neighbors to, I don't know, feed your cat when you're in Hawaii, it's an admission that you are weak. You see what I mean? And that's taking. And taking is the worst way of humanity, right? Like, it's better to give than receive. Giving is receiving. Receiving is taking. Yeah. That's a huge message, I believe, in this particular Taurus full moon conjoined Uranus reflecting Scorpio light in a cycle that was seated in the sign of Libra, square Capricorn crew and opposite to Aries Mars. So the great entrance into the energy of the second is that the cord is cut. And now the baby got to eat, you know? And you can't do it alone. I mean, a child will not survive on their own. And let me say it this way. We are all children of the light. You cannot survive on your own. And whether that's the need for human touch, which should be a need, or the need for nutrients, which is definitely a need, or even the need for space, which is a need for an agreement with others also, you see. I mean, eat food, right? Like, I'm going to eat a salad when this thing ends. It's not like it's me, it's outside of me. It's very difficult for the one that's all about who am I and what is my mountain to climb, what is my path in life, to feel the truth that that exploration in this vessel can't happen without some fuel, and that that fuel requires something outside of me. I have needs to be fed. And I have to learn that that's okay if ever I want to tune into the beautiful truth of receiving, which really, I think all signs have their ways of giving and their ways of receiving, but some are more configured towards one side of the thing than the other. And Taurus should be the blessed teaching of receiving. Again, slowing down, the grace of first place, the moment now, receiving the present of the presence of the present moment. But also, literally, it's okay to have needs. It's okay to need space. It's okay to need touch. It's okay to need food. It's okay to need love. It's okay to need to know that I have worth in this world, which is truly the powerful, the most powerful voice, and sometimes hidden voice of the second that I've heard whispered. And there's, I'm sure, levels of the spiral of that I've not yet touched, and some that I likely will not. But it's not just your money and your resources. Yes, it is, because it's about survival. But most importantly, it's the truth that you have worth in this world. I love to teach it this way. The fifth is the child, and the 10th of the fifth is the second. So the child's job is to spend your money. But more importantly, the child's job is to help you understand that you have worth and value. And the child's not just your biological, so it's certainly them, but it's also all of these amazing poems and sculptures and thoughts and things that you create. So be in your art. It's so important. This is a love force, your needs, because see, it separates you from separation, right? So I shouldn't call it a love force. It's by temperament, it's a wet force. What do I mean by that? There's dry and there's moist. Okay, so dry, Aries, fire, is like grains of sand on the hot beach. Yeah, we are each a unique grain of sand, and yes, we are. And then the wave comes, and now those grains of sand are all together in one clay. Moisture brings us together. Dryness separates. So there's hot that lifts us up, and cool that brings us down. There's dry separates, and moisture that brings us together. And the systems of temperament. And Pisces is a very wet force. We are all one. And Aries is a very dry force. I am I. And Taurus is a very wet force. Why? Because I need the love, the support, the milk of another. So as we're speaking about abandonment, I mean, imagine this thing that I'm sure every child goes through, regardless of how attentive the mother is. Some sadly only live here, which is, I need mother's milk and it doesn't come. I mean, maybe they read that Dutch book, how to raise a crying child and break them of their needs, or whatever. But at some point at 3 a.m, you're screaming for your mother's milk, and she rolls her eyes and tries to go back to sleep, and you got to deal with that. But I think really importantly, we're all screaming for milk. Actually, we stopped screaming. And that's a problem. We don't want to scream. We want to speak lovingly. But none of that can happen unless we acknowledge our needs. And that we acknowledge that our needs are not neediness. Actually, literally they are, but that neediness is not bad. And that having an understanding of what my needs are and what their needs are, okay, is a very important thing, right? So this is something I really am coming to terms with more and more. And I've taught it well before I understood it, and I don't understand it yet. But if I do everything for my partner that I need done for me to feel loved, that does not mean she will feel loved, because she's not me. And if she does everything for me that she needs to be done for her in order for her to be loved, that does not mean I will feel loved, because I am not her. Now, the consideration of what are her needs, what is her love language versus what are my needs, that's a 7th house thing. That's like a nip in this Libra land if we talk sign-based astrology, right? That is not here in Taurus. The baby cries at 3 a.m. The baby is not meant to give a shit about what mom needs. Seriously. I need to be changed now. I need food now. I need a hug now. I've been isolated for some people. This is very true, for months and months and months with no human contact. I need space now. Some of us have been anti-isolated for months and months and months and just been with the partner and the family full time. I know that's the experience of many right now. And it's causing evolution. And it's demanding that we set healthy boundaries about what my needs are. What are the needs of the me, and what are the needs of the we, and how sometimes do they compete, and how will I never create a world of harmony and peace if I mute my needs in an attempt to honor those of the other, those of the relationship, right? The needs of the relationship, and there's a little bit of eighth, or maybe a lot of eighthness in this, they don't exist by drowning my needs, or else I'm just serving some monster, right? They exist as a function of my needs and their needs, and whether that's an intimate partnership, a business partnership, any relationship, right? So Libra is kind of like marriage, and Scorpio kind of like honeymoon when things get merged and fucking real and tantric and intense. And therefore it can also be the divorce, but it can be this place of amazing growth that is only opened when we stop faking that it's not always all easy. So Scorpio's reaction to Libra is, I will drop a big water bomb in one of those scales. So if you think you're, peaceful, but it's actually only through you suppressing your truth, you're going to feel the waves of the tidal waves. And when you come back into equilibrium, now you've seen authenticity. Transformation, death, and rebirth. These are things that we say about that sign that hosts the light now. And as the moon reflects it back from the sign of Taurus, we're really asked about sexuality, which is how we turn the other on, and sensuality, which is how we receive what we like, And I'm not just talking about coitus when I say that. Huge themes right now. And something wants to change. What wants to change likely is me acknowledging that my needs are not evil. It's interesting. Traditionally, every sign, let's go Aries, is blind to its neighbors. That would be Pisces and Taurus, and blind to the neighbors of its polarity, which are Scorpio and Virgo. And this is why likely there's so much baggage assigned to 12th, prisons and hidden things and personal undoing, to the 8th, death, to the 6th, illness, and to the 2nd. How did the 2nd get off the hook? We don't say it's some evil house or something. And none of the houses are evil. I'm just kind of exaggeratingly speaking in the language of the ancient ones who carved this craft and its rules. We are told that the love of money is the root of all evil, so maybe there's something there. But I think it's actually more about needs and more about the journey into self-worth. So this Libra new moon, this cycle in which we dance now, still, because I like the symbol of the times based upon the sign in which the moon and the sun together align. Personally, I'm a lunation kind of guy. This is about what are my needs, what are your needs, what are the needs of the culture, and how do we find a way to balance that? And I think where we're being told is, right, that form of love, which is othership, right, consideration. I asked a student the other day, tell me about Libra, and she said compassion. I said, not really, because that's a water word. Libra's considerate. It's an air word. You feel the difference? And we want it both, right? There's a lot of water. There's a lot of water. And so when the new moon aligns in late degrees of a sign, the full moon will be across from its neighbor. In signs, interestingly, the sun and the moon that are in conjunct to Libra, traditionally speaking, but Taurus and Libra are signs that are said to be like and girding, because they are both domiciles of the great goddess Venus, who is here now and in conjunct, quincunx, this moon Uranus happening. Because how can I be in othership if I'm focused on my needs? And I believe that this full moon, more than anything, is offering for us significant shifts and revelations, dynamic change, if we understand how could we be in harmony and peace if we are not in tune with our own needs. That selfness is the furthest thing from selfish. In fact, selfness is entirely necessary for harmonic, non-hierarchical, equal relating. And that is the story of the healing now, as far as what I hear in the heavenly harmonies. But what do you hear? So here is the challenge invitation, and share or don't share, right? For our breakout groups, not breakup groups. It can be. In this breakout group, if you are willing, and please don't go there if you don't want to, share with your crew what in you, or perhaps what in your experience of another, is most keeping you from honoring an unmet and perhaps unspoken need at this time in your life. All right, so I hope that final breakout room was powerful for you, as it was like beyond for me. And I personally received some really wonderful advice. So thank you for my breakout team for helping me see the keys that might help me break out of a cell in which I've imprisoned myself. But we get out of those things when we realize that we're the prisoner and the warden, and that we've had the keys in our hands the whole time. But like Saturn, sometimes we need that wall to push against to get strong enough for the breakthrough. So it's not just Uranus and the lightning bolt, but sometimes the tower itself that really teaches growth. And so one thing that came alive in my group was a general theme was the idea of shame. And again, anybody who wants to share in a chat, I would love to hear from you. One thing that came in here from another group was respect your own needs while confronted with a relationship challenge. Yeah, I mean, I really feel that that is not only one of the greatest human experiences, because we are here as monkeys, to pick the bugs out of each other's hair without doing so until our arm falls off. That really respecting our own needs and being in relationship with self and being in relationship with our own heart is so essential if we really want to engage with a sensual, deep, merging relationship with any other. And that's not just in relationship stuff, right? All right, so here we hear from one. Perhaps we're here to have a fully sensual experience. I mean, that does seem to make sense that we are in these vessels that can experience time and space through things like sight and smells and touch and taste, So I know that others feel that their path is more in the ways of the mind, and some more in the heart, and some more in the body. We can obviously see that elementally described in nativity, but yes, here we are incarnate into matter. So let's remember that matter matters and really go there. And definitely Taurus, I think, is one of the great keepers of those embodiment and sensual codes. And so, living the chart and seeing it in the sky and hearing the chart and making music of it. This has been really important for my own adventure. And any of my students that are here know that we begin with the compass and the square, the sacred geometry of the thing, and one of these great sister sciences. So I'm always looking for how we can sensualize our astrology and not just have it in the mind. And speaking of music, one great words from a wonderful sage come through here, one called Neil Young, who is such an old soul. When one isn't giving, one pretends to receive. That's Neil Young from his wonderful song, Pardon My Heart. When one isn't giving, one pretends to receive. And our messenger friend is dancing backwards through earthly skies right now. So let's retrograde that one and make this from Neil Old. When one isn't receiving, one pretends to give. Perhaps this is also true. I feel like shame is actually percolating to the surface for many, which may be old patterning ready to be healed, regardless of story and details. And that was a really wonderful place to open up with the group with whom I sat. And maybe that came alive for some of the other groups here, of this kind of shame and the cultural expectations and the pain right now, right? With like a harmonious mind of equality and everybody's voice should be heard versus the challenges of, oh my gosh, the ship is sinking and we have to awaken before it does. And the challenges also of individuating from maybe the consciousness of family or the culture and the old rules that don't necessarily serve you in your own place of growth. Regardless, the Taurus Scorpio thing is it's deep. And I think that we say that so much about Scorpio. Maybe we should say it more about Taurus. And maybe even if we do, we'll let Scorpio a little bit off the hook of doing all the transformation. So I guess the last question I'll ask before I end the recording, then we can talk together as one big family here, if you'd like to stay on for a bit, is what transformation will Taurus lead us into that the other signs could not possibly, right? So that chariot pulled by the Teresian ox is able to plow fields that Scorpio and Sag and Capricorn and all the other beings cannot. So at this time with Taurus Uranus and this full moon aligning in such a powerful way, but in this Libra month, in this very kind of Venusian cycle, what transformations can Taurus entertain that the other signs are very blind to? So I would leave you all to break out of your old rooms with that great question, or maybe it's not so great. Do with it what you will. If you're watching this later on YouTube or the like, you can post comments about that if you want to below. I'm always excited to read comments. You know, it connects us to community throughout not only space, but also time. And for those of you who did join me live or joining me later, if you want to learn about how to join these moon group things live, you can sign up for my mailing list at geminibrett.com on the home page, and you'll receive emails for when they are going down. They are a free offering. Although also, if you've learned something here live or open in ways that you feel that you'd like to give something back for, no pressure at all, but you will also find a donate button at geminibrett.com. So I really want to thank many of you who were here last time, sent very generous donations. It's kind of going into this place that will help me pay for the Zoom video and all that first, you know, but then also kind of going into a space where I can recreate perhaps platforms where we can do this moon group thing in such a way that it feels more and more, hopefully, that we are all sitting in the room or sitting in small groups and engaging together. That's my prayer of how we can find that sensual experience of embodied exchange of grounded information in these times of rules, enforced isolation and fear, and which is all serving the transformation. So thanks again for tuning in. And I'm going to hit stop record for those of you who are still here live, and we'll get to share some heart and some thought before this Halloween full moon aligns. But for the sake of the truth that it is a Taurus Uranus full moon on Halloween, just a quick wah ha ha ha. Enjoy, friends.